Hi, everyone, and welcome to another powerful conversation with yet another powerful woman. These conversations are with women that are inspiring, have inspiring stories to share. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Shinara George today, who has a very powerful story to share. And I think she's an incredible inspiration as well. So she fits the bill for the title of the show. So welcome, Shinara. Thank you for joining me.
I'm really, really excited actually. I've not done anything like this before.
Well, I'm very excited too. So tell us a little bit about yourself and about your white fluffy little dog there as well, who's
This is
joining
a
us.
polar bear.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're okay. So I brought him because he is the mascot for our charity, or what will be our charity when we get set up. And I thought it might be nice to have him here with
Yeah.
us. I like having him during meetings, especially when I'm talking about my son. So I'll start with that actually.
Yes.
So I've already been introduced, but I run a business called La Luna Bella, and we sell eco-friendly children's clothing, and we offer a buy and swap system where you buy a product from us, you send it back, and that product goes back into circulation. And it just means that there's no waste. The clothing is going round and round in a circle until it can't be used anymore, and then we recycle it to someone who will make it into something new, basically to just save the the outside. In other countries, they have these big huge piles of clothing that are, you know, not being used, and they probably can't be used because they're decomposing and they're ruining our environment. So we really aim to prevent as much of that as we can with children's clothes, especially because they grow out of clothes so quickly,
Yeah.
and parents don't very often have the time to take them to charity shops, or send the clothing somewhere else. So we deal with all of that for them. And the backstory behind it was, I was pregnant. So I got pregnant in about, oh God, April last year. So around about this time last year, I got pregnant, and I decided while I was pregnant that I didn't want to work in an office or go back to retail. I dropped out of college, so I didn't have any qualifications, and I knew that I wanted to be home with my son, but I didn't want to put all the pressure of money on my partner. So we sat down one day and I said, I'd really like to have my own business, something I can work from home and I can be with the baby. And my partner said, if that's what you want to do, that's what we'll do. But I wanted something that was going to be beneficial for him. I didn't just want to do anything. And that's where the idea of doing something for the environment came in, because I started learning about how fast we're killing our environment. And it made me realize that by the time my son is my age, he may not have had anything left, of this beautiful world. We were just talking about the sun,
Yeah.
and how beautiful it is when the sun comes out, and we could lose that, very, very soon if we don't, if we're not more conscious about what we're consuming. So that was where the idea came from. But then, unfortunately, in September last year, my son died. Uh, I gave birth to him and he just passed away during birth. My waters broke too early. He was only 21
Mm.
weeks. And I sat down and I thought, do I still want to do this? Is this still something that I want to put my energy into? Because, my child died and I wasn't sure if I was ready to keep going with it. And I hadn't really started setting up yet. I was doing some work with the Prince's Trust right before he died, and they've been really supportive of the business. And I spoke to my mentor, and she said she thinks it's a good idea to keep going, that it might be really good to keep going,
Mm.
that the story of my son actually might be a really powerful way to get more people involved. Because, people, they love a story and they love to be able to contribute to something that's going to do better good for the world. So um, I decided to carry on, and then my partner and I decided we also wanted to tack on a charity, which we haven't really started up yet. We want to be ideally pulling in some revenue from the business to be able to put towards the charity. But the idea for it is to support families who have lost children to PPROM, which is what my son died of.
Mhm.
Um, and that's kind of where the idea came in. And obviously that's why we've got our mascot here. Polar bears are my son's thing. I don't know if you can see, up here is his memory shelf. So these are all his
Oh,
things.
yeah.
And there's a ton of polar bears all over our flat. And so we settled on Aspyn stars and the polar bear as our mascot. And we had a really very friendly person make a logo and all of our stuff for us for free, since we're a charity. And eventually, once the business hopefully starts gaining traction, then we'll be able to put money into the charity. And we want to be taking families away for the weekend to different areas in the UK, so that they kind of have a group of people that they can talk to who have been through the same thing. Because PPROM is, although it all comes under child loss, PPROM is a very specific kind of child loss. And I feel like it very often, because it's so rare, it's hard to find people who are going through the same thing. So we're hoping that we can bring families from all over England together to come on trips and make new friends and be able to talk about their children and do things together.
That's amazing. Can you just share quickly what PPROM is, just
Yes,
sort
of
of
course.
in layman's terms?
Yes, so PPROM is preterm premature rupture of membranes, which in a non-scientific term basically just means your waters are broken. And there is just PROM, which is just premature rupture of membranes, and PROM is often past viability. So past 24 weeks, that's PROM, and PPROM is before 24 weeks. So that's preterm. So it's before a
Yeah.
child can survive.
Yeah.
Very often with PPROM, women can carry all the way to term and then give birth. They would be very, very premature, but the NICUs are wonderful, and very often babies do survive PPROM. However, I got very unlucky because there is about a 0.3% chance of a cord prolapse, and that is exactly what happened to me. And that then meant that my son was at risk of an infection, and that caused his loss. But it's different for everyone. PPROM is, considering how rare it is, it's a very varied experience.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite common for it to happen later on down the line. So if it does happen, normally you've got nothing to fear because you're already in viability and your child would just have to spend some time in the NICU. But unfortunately, it is something that does happen before viability as well, and that causes passing.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a powerful story, such a difficult story as well, because I can't even imagine that, like, the depth of emotions that must sort of go alongside it. But I find it utterly inspiring how you've turned that into a charity. But even before all of that, just turning it into just your vision about having a more sustainable future is just, it's just so inspiring from somebody. I mean, I know that you're much younger than I am, and I find it incredible that where do you think that sort of that drive and that initiative comes from?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I have very powerful parents, I will say that. I grew
Yeah.
up with parents who encouraged me and told me that I could do anything I wanted to do, that I was very clever, and that there was nothing I couldn't do. And I think that is a lot of the reason why I am the way I am now. I had wonderful parents. And then I also have an older brother who's a lot older than me, and he was exactly the same. He really
Mhm.
believed in me and told me that there was nothing I couldn't do. And then obviously my partner came into the picture, and he is exactly the same. So I will say it is a lot of just being surrounded by people who really,
Yeah.
really believe in me. And I think I excelled in school. And I think that was just because I'd convinced myself that if I just did my best in everything I did, then there was absolutely nothing that I could not do. And being a good mum was probably the most important thing in the world to me. And so saving the environment for my son felt like something that all mums should be thinking about. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, there are so many things in our lives, not just as mothers, but just as people. And we get so busy that sometimes it does get swept under the rug. But I
Yeah.
think one of the most important things in the world, and something that we did very recently, was swapping plastic straws to paper ones and things like that. And even those tiny little changes, maybe, like buying a reusable cup instead of using a plastic cup. There's such minute changes, but they mean so much to the world around us and to our next generations. And ultimately, people are very quick to say, oh, well, I won't be around when it happens, so why should I care about it? But if you really love the people that are around you, even if it's not your children, your nieces and nephews, your your grandchildren, you know, anybody like that who's in your life who you love very dearly, then
Yeah.
you should want them to have the same life that you've got. I mean, we've been very blessed with the earth that we have, and
Yeah.
it's still so beautiful even now, though it's very polluted now. It's still in, you know, a very good state, but in a few
Yeah.
years it could be not in a very good state, and that's going to be no good for our descendants and our kids. And we really want to keep it just as beautiful as we have it today.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that if everybody were to make those small incremental changes, then together as a collective whole, we could make, you know, such a huge difference to the world and reverse it all very quickly. I was talking to Cressy of Alvis and Cressy a few months back, and she was talking about how they'd regenerated the land on the farm that they have with a sort of like a herbal tea that had soaked it all, and all of the life had come back in just 1 year. And it's like, if we all decided to put some effort into doing this, it could make such a big difference really quickly. And I just don't understand how people are in denial of it.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just, I think it's really inspiring.
Yeah, I do understand that it can be hard for people to make certain changes. And I think that there's a misconception that that we have to make huge, big, you know, impactful, massive changes consistently. That and people get like they get overwhelmed at the idea that they have to do these huge massive changes, but in reality doing the tiniest changes can really make an impact. I mean, if we were all to sew up an item of clothing when it gets a hole in it, you know, just with some thread and a needle, and if we all had that skill, then we could get years and years, you know, of extra worth out of our clothing, and they wouldn't go on the landfills in all these other countries. And one of the
Yeah.
most impactful things I learned when I was researching this, and it was something I'd never thought of before, I watched a video. I can't remember where it was, but it was on one of the biggest clothing landfills in the world. And there were a group of young children, and these were kids between the ages of about 5 and 8, and they were out on the landfill and they were picking up clothes and pieces of items to take home to their families so that their mothers could stitch them up for
Yeah.
them and to sell on their markets. And it just made me think, like, these big mountainous areas where there's so many clothes, these poor children, how dangerous is it that they're going out there and having to, you know, scavenge through these clothing when we could in reality just be sending these
Yeah.
clothes over straight to these families instead of chucking them on the landfills. Instead, we could be investing money in sending the clothes straight to the charity, to the people who are repairing them out in these countries with poorer families as well, instead
Yeah.
of wasting them, because there are tons and tons of clothes that can be repaired. And
Yeah.
the problem is there's so much fast fashion, and very often it's materials that are made of synthetic stuff, and it's a lot harder to repair synthetic materials, but it can
Yeah.
be done, and we should be researching more into it and figuring out how we can repair and reuse these synthetic materials,
Yeah.
because otherwise they're ending up in our environment and really
Yeah.
polluting our space.
Yeah. I can't remember if we mentioned it when we spoke before, but I mean, I like to have lots of different creative hobbies, and one of the ones I'm trying out in a few weeks is a Japanese technique called, I always get the name wrong, shisheko.
Mhm,
And there's another one called boro, but that is also, boro is about taking, I think it was peasants in Japan that formulated this technique, and you basically take a square of fabric from an old item of clothing and you sort of patchwork it
mhm,
onto a new one, and these items just over time just become more and more beautiful because that it's like a story and a life that is building up over, you know, because these items then last for decades,
mhm,
which I absolutely love. And the other thing I was going to say was I've spent a little bit of time in Copenhagen recently, and I was speaking to a mum to be over there, and they have a really huge culture over there of of recycling. They have like a Facebook that is specifically for parents to recycle everything, to do with having children, which I think is completely incredible. But also we went to a shop where there's a range of fishermen's cardigans that you buy once and they last for like 30-40 years if you look after them properly.
Mhm.
And I think it's getting your head around the fact that something can be stylish and really good quality and have just be so classic that it just lasts and it builds character over time. And with fast fashion, we just forget that, it's all about what you look like and so superficial.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the massive problem with fast fashion right now is with the slightly younger generation, so my generation. And the problem is that we don't have very much. A lot of us don't have very much money, and fast fashion. The appeal of it is that it is very cheap and it's easy to buy 100 items of clothing for like 80 quid. And I think what we need to be putting focus on right now, I think the focus is too much on don't shop fast fashion instead of on, okay, if you find something that you think you're going to love for years and years and years, buy it and repair it. Because ultimately, if you're going to buy from a fast fashion brand, and this is why I've been called a hypocrite before, because I do have a few fast fashion items in my wardrobe, and the problem is that I'm not a very well off person, and I'm sure a lot of people in the economy aren't right now. But what I do is I buy something and then I reuse it over and over, and I sew it back up, and and it never goes to waste. And then when I don't want it, very often my clothing goes to my friends, or it even goes to my niece as she gets older. A lot of my old clothes from when I was a child have gone to my niece, and she loves them. She makes use out of them. I had tons of beautiful floral dresses that my mum bought for me, that were probably from Primark, but I've had them for years and years and years, and now my niece has them. And I think the problem is that people are so quick to say, if you shop fast fashion, you're a bad person. And it's ultimately, it's really, really not true. If you shop fast fashion, the thing is you probably just don't have the money to shop the more expensive, higher quality items. And you can't be faulted for that. No one has very much money right now, I don't think. So the idea is just to transform them into something new when you're done with them, to avoid having to throw them away. And I think that's really where our focus needs to be, instead of on saying, don't shop these things, just shop less and reuse them.
Yeah, no, exactly. And if you're anything like me, all of our old T-shirts get made into rag rugs, which is also quite a lot of fun as well. I intend that they'll be handed down in my will or something, because I don't see that they're going to be going anywhere.
No, I definitely agree. Little things like that. We have now started reusing all our jars. So we brought 3 Starbucks coffees, they come in the glass jars, and we've just washed out the jars, peeled the labels off, and we reuse them. If we're going somewhere, we just fill them with water and take them as a water drink. And we've got I have a jar that did have honey in it, and it now has crushed up eggshell, and I use that to fertilize my plants out on my balcony and things like that. So even just like the smallest things that seem like they mean absolutely nothing can really make a difference. And that is the problem, is people think they have to make this huge big contribution by donating thousands of pounds or doing volunteering. You don't have to. You just have to change a few little things in your day-to-day life.
So what's been the biggest challenge so far since you set up your company and while you've been setting up the charity?
We've had a few big things. Setting up a business is not easy. I'll start with that. It's very much not easy. I definitely thought it would be easier. I think the biggest thing right now is reaching the correct target audience, because the problem with the kind of fashion that I deal with the children's clothing is that we buy from an eco-friendly supplier, and that means that we pay a little bit extra for the clothing that we buy wholesale, whereas when fast fashion companies or companies that buy mass produced items buy from their wholesalers, they could maybe buy a t-shirt for £1 and then sell it for £10, and that's a £9 profit margin, right? But we can't do that because we are buying high quality clothing that's meant to last. And so our prices are a little bit higher than other baby and children clothing companies. And so we really need to reach that niche target market of people who have the money and are invested in looking after the environment. They're the people that are more likely to buy from us. And we've got to hit that right target whilst also hitting the target of people who are okay with repurchasing reused clothing. Because obviously with the buy and swap system, you are going to be buying at some point. It will be cheaper, but you will be purchasing from the other section of the store reused clothing. And some people, and it is really sad to say, but some people don't like to buy reused clothing. They think it's dirty and not very nice, and that's not very much not true. But there is this niche that if you have to buy from charity shops or vintage clothing shops and things like that, that you are poor, which isn't true at all, because I know, people with loads of money that buy from charity shops and vintage shops, because you can find so many cool things. I mean, there's
Amazing.
so many, hidden gems in vintage stores. I just bought a jacket. It's a vintage NFL, National Football League, the American National Football League jumper. And it's heavy duty, it's high quality, and it's going to last me for years. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's clean. We washed it. The charity shop, they wash it. But I think there is this misconception that hand-me-down clothing is not as good as brand new clothing, when in reality it's just as good, and there is just as much use. So there's a very hard target market that we have to hit with what we're doing, and that's kind of been the biggest problem right now. But with the charity, I think the biggest problem is that we need donations to get started, and we also need trustee members. And the problem with getting trustee members is it's a very specific kind of trustee member. We need someone ideally who has some kind of knowledge in the field of child loss, people who have a lot of empathy or sympathy, and people that are very able to be empathetic towards the people we're trying to help. Because it's all well and good us hiring trustees, but if we're not hiring trustees who are as invested in what we do as me and my partner are, and obviously we're very invested because to us this is our second child, this is our son's legacy, he's got his name stamped right on it. So that's kind of the trouble right now, is finding trustee members, and also getting the donations in, mostly because we aren't recognized as an official charity until we get our trustee members, and people often will see that and very understandably will go, oh, they're not registered yet, this could be a scam. And ultimately what's ruined that for people is that there are people out there who are willing to do things like that, and it's really sad, because it takes away from people who are really trying to do good in the world, and people become less, trusting. But once we get our trustee members together and we're making more money from the business, we will put the first donation in from our profit from the business, and then hopefully we can get the ball rolling with it and start offering services to people out there.
Well, hopefully somebody will listen to this and it will tick a bell and resonate with ring a bell and resonate with them, and you never know where things can lead. For sure. And there was a question that I that came up to me when you were just talking then, and it's completely gone, which doesn't surprise me. Let's see if I can think what it was. No, anyway, I won't. I will move on to my next one. Where do you see your business in, say, 5 years from now? Where would you like to see your business and the charity?
My business, I would really like to see it doing well. I would really like to see it being successful, mostly because my partner and I, we aren't driven by monetary gain. Obviously, we would like some monetary gain so that we can run it full time, but that isn't what drives us. What drives us is the hope that the business will be so successful that we can fund the charity with it, because it is very, very hard. It's very, very hard to run a charity, because there are so many charities out there that people don't know where to donate their money. So our hope is that the business will be so successful that we'll be able to fund everything for the charity ourselves, and we won't have to rely too much on donations. But we would also like to have an in-person store in London, preferably. We found an area of London that we really like, but obviously London is an expensive place to own a shop. And so we would like to be in the position where we can own an in-person shop so that people can come in and meet us and, you know, look around and actually feel the quality of the clothing. And that way they know what they're getting and they're not just looking at a photo and hoping that it's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. I remembered what I was going to say. I noticed recently that even companies like Urban Outfitters now have a range of clothes on there that are, they don't call them secondhand, they call them something else.
Yes.
But that is what it might even be repurposed, or there's a word that they've used. So I think it is, as a movement, is growing more than it was.
Definitely. And again, I think that links in with my generation. I think that because we're going through this cost of living, people are going, okay, maybe we should start being really careful with how we spend. And when places like Urban Outfitters, which is hugely influential to young people, I mean, I love Urban Outfitters.
Yeah.
It's hugely influential to young people. When they come out with a range like that, it does a lot more good than people think it does. You know, it makes people go, oh, actually, that looks cool. Urban Outfitters thinks this is cool. So I think this is cool. And then there's also places like Etsy. They obviously host mostly people that make handmade items, but they also have like a vintage section for clothing, and you can go and look on that. And a lot of places are doing it now. I even noticed there's a woman I follow on TikTok. She hand makes her own clothing for like raves, for people going to parties and things. And she has a pre-loved section on her website. And I saw it and I thought, wow, this is just wonderful that people are really thinking about the kind of effect that their handmade clothing has. And I mean, she's slow fashion, so she's the complete opposite because she hand makes everything and she's wonderful. And there are lots of people out there like that who are really, really focusing on doing better for the environment, and it is because they're scared. And it's sad that we've had to get to the point where we're scared before we do anything, because we've been doing this for years. I mean, over the last 10 years, I think we've done more damage to the environment than we have, 50 years before that. So it is really nice to see that people are starting to take it a bit more seriously, and they're actually saying, hold up, this is really scary. We could really have a big problem on our hands.
There's a comment in the chat about not knowing where to give hand-me-downs. Where would you suggest somebody takes their hand-me-downs?
There are a few different options. So if you live close to one, a charity shop is always a wonderful option to give hand-me-downs to, especially because the funds from that will then go to the charity. I would say to research the charity before you give it to the charity shop, because different charities have different policies on how much of a percentage of profit go towards the actual charity and how much of it goes towards funding other things, which is completely understandable because it is expensive to run a charity. But if you're someone who really wants all of that money to go towards the charity itself, then it's good to research how much of a percentage they put in. If you don't want to take it to a charity shop, there are a lot of places online that take hand-me-downs. So there is a website actually called Big Sister Swap, and I rave about this, and it actually gave me the idea for my business. They're a wonderful company, and what they do is if you send them in a 10-kilogram bag of your old clothing, and then you pay a fee, and the fee is to cover personal stylist, and they will pick you based on your personal style and the style you give them. They'll pick you at 10 kilograms worth of clothes and they'll send that back to you. So then they get all the old clothing. You take all of the other hand-me-downs that other people have sent in that might be more in your style, and it gives you basically a whole new wardrobe of things that are brand new, and then they get to reuse the clothing that you have sent in. They're a wonderful company, and I can't speak highly, more highly about them than that. They are incredible in what they do, and it's a very clever idea, and it is similar to what my company does, but we deal with baby clothing, and obviously they deal with adults. But that is a wonderful idea. There are a lot of vintage clothing. If you have clothing from that's a bit older, maybe hand-me-downs from grandparents, anything with the Nike logo or vintage Adidas, anything vintage can go to vintage shops. Often they will buy big bags of vintage clothing that you can sell to them, and you will get some money back. So that is if you want some money back. But if you are just interested in getting rid of the clothing for like nothing, then, and you're not too worried about getting a cash monetary value, I will always advocate for charity shops.
Yeah.
I think that it's a wonderful thing to do, and it's wonderfully kind, and it is a way to donate to these charities without really, you know, actually donating. You're just donating things that they can sell. We will at some point also be taking hand-me-down children's clothing, not just from our original range, but also from other companies as well. That's something we're looking into and we may be doing later on down the line. So if you have lots and lots of baby clothing and you are interested in helping my business or helping the charity, then we will happily take any old clothes that you do not want and you aren't worried about getting monetary value back from, and anything we sell from that we will put into our charity.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I'm conscious that we've been already talking for over half an hour, so I could carry on talking for ages and ages, but I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving us your time today and for sharing something that is, you know, really, really so important. And I just, as I said, the inspiration, the creativity is just incredible. And, you know, I wish you all the success moving forward, because it's a really great thing that you're onto here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will talk again, I am sure.
Definitely we will.
Best of luck. And I will put in the show notes all the details to your website and charity so that people can get in touch and also follow you on LinkedIn as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.